The Boondokl Bedtime Stories by Dr. Robert Lefevre, number 15. "Come along, children," said the Venerable Charles Bootle. "Come along, Henry, come along, Bee," said their mother, Dr. Nicola Bootle. "You mustn't let your father down." Henry and Beatrice had no intention of being late or of letting their father down on this special day. It was just that, well, there were one or two things that they wanted to do first. Henry wanted to make sure that his new nature study activity, an ant farm enclosed in glass so that he can watch how ants work in their homes, didn't collapse. That would result in ants getting all over his bedroom and perhaps, terrible thought, into other parts of the house. If that happened, he knew that his mother would give him a fate worse than death. Beatrice just wanted to make sure that she had all her sport things nicely organised. Next week her team were playing an important match in netball, and she knew if at the last minute she couldn't find any of her things, her mother would give her a fate worse than death. Dr. Nicola Bootle isn't really very fierce at all. She's very nice, but she does like to make sure that things are done properly. So it's true that sometimes she says to the children that if a particular thing doesn't happen when she says it should, or does happen when she said it shouldn't, she might give her children a fate worse than death. She never says what that fate might be, but children are never slow to imagine things, and Henry and Beatrice decided that they didn't want to find out what it was that their mother had in mind. So the Bootle household generally ran very well, except, of course, when the Boondokl took over the children's bedrooms. The Boondokl didn't mean any harm. They just do the things that Boondokl do, like building bridges and tunnels and runs with toys and games and clothes and all sorts of things all over the room. On those occasions, Dr. Nicola Bootle felt a bit upset and a bit confused. Of course, she'd never seen a boondok, because Boondokl don't come out when grown-ups are around, and therefore she thought that something had gone wrong in the way that she'd brought up Henry and Beatrice. She even wondered whether she ought to attend classes on how to be a better parent. "Do you think I ought to attend parenting classes, Venerable Bootle?" she asked her husband one day. "Well, Dr. Bootle," replied her husband, trying to keep a straight face, "I don't think they'd survive." "Oh, where?" said Dr. Nicola Bootle. Anyway, on this special day, eventually, everyone was ready to go to the church fete, and it was very exciting. "Just one thing, children," said their mother, almost as a habit. "I hope you have tidied your rooms. When we come home this evening, I don't want to find that they're all messed up. I don't want to hear any of that nonsense about Boondokl taking over your rooms when you're out. We've heard more than enough of that. Just because the bishop thinks that untidy rooms are all right, it doesn't mean that I do, and your father doesn't either." As it happens, the Venerable Charles Bootle probably wouldn't have minded all that much if the children's rooms did get into a mess every so often. But he knew better than to disagree with his wife on something that she thinks is important in the way of bringing children up properly. Best of all, he likes going up to the attic to look at the moon and the stars and the planets through his telescope. He likes a quiet life. "And if your rooms are a mess when I see them this evening," said Dr. Nicola Bootle to her children, who for some reason had raised their eyes to look at the ceiling, "you know what you'll get." "Yes, Mummy," said both Henry and Beatrice together. "A fate worse than death." Dr. Nicola Bootle smiled kindly at her children. Even she herself didn't know what a fate worse than death might be. It was just something she said. She didn't really mean it. Adults are funny that way sometimes, saying things that they don't really mean. It can be very puzzling. To be continued.